Thank you so much for inviting me here today. I do feel like I'm in a new context with you all. I represent an organization called New Economy Project, which was founded in 1995. We've been around, if you do the math, for 22 years in New York City. And I'm going to tell you about our organization, I'm going to tell you about our work, but I want to sort of put some things in stark relief, taking some of the threads that you've already been discussing today to kind of frame the work that we do at New Economy Project. And let me just start by saying that I don't come from a faith tradition in the kind of formal or classifiable sense, but that is not to say that I don't have deeply held sense of ethics and morality and justice that drive my work, that drive the work of everybody at the organization where I am. We are 100% secular, and we are 100% deeply committed, and you could say that is our faith, or however you want to call it. We're not so hung up on words around that, but we're driven by a very, very deeply rooted sense that we cannot sit by with injustice that we have. And think about it, we started the organization in 1995. I'm going to show you some slides, and we're going to see how some of the issues around financial injustice play out not just for individuals and for families, because we know, I mean, if you were here and you heard about the financial diaries, you understand, at least to some extent, and through your congregants and your lives yourselves, the struggles that people have. But these issues also play out geographically. They play out by neighborhood. And I'm going to talk a bit about how financial injustice and structural discrimination and inequities serve to perpetuate segregation and inequality and poverty. A lot of the issues in the slides I'm going to show predate this current nightmare that we're in. I haven't yet found words. Words do matter here. Anyone want to, what is this collective nightmare? Does someone have a name for this?
Trump.
Can't say it in your color. What's that? Agent Orange, okay. I'm not sure how to say it, except that...
Traditions, apocalypse?
Apocalypse. Yeah, I mean, so, you know, we're going to talk about economic security and financial justice, but we're now, even though, again, some of these maps I'm going to show you and the things I'm going to talk about are structures that predate this nightmare, we are now in this unprecedented, for many of us, not all of us in the world, but we're unprecedented, certainly in the 22 years I've been doing this work and the 53 years I've been on this planet, where we have government policy that is blatantly, without any pretense otherwise, aiming to widen inequality, to exacerbate inequality. And we, for many years, were working on, with community groups in communities of color that were dealing with the foreclosure crisis. People started talking at the national level about a foreclosure crisis when? Does anyone have a year in their head when you started hearing about it kind of on the national level?
1990.
Well, 1990s in New York City, in communities of color, we were talking about a foreclosure crisis, because that's what was happening. Neighborhoods were being mauled by predatory mortgage lending of all different sorts in communities of color at all income levels. But it wasn't until many years later the whole country started being, oh, there's a crisis in our mortgage lend. But actually it started, was really rooted in communities of color in New York City, Central Brooklyn, Southeast Queens, Northeast Bronx, and so forth. And in those days we would say, what we're witnessing is the wholesale transfer of wealth from communities of color to Wall Street. Right? Because people talk about, you know, what should you do if someone knocks on your door? These transactions aren't fair. How do we make foreclosures fairer? How do we get the banks to the table? And these are all important strategic questions, but ultimately what was going on is that this was yet another example of vast economic exploitation that really just siphoned wealth, extracted wealth from communities of color. Well, now here we are, fast forward, we can look at our first slide, and we are looking at not, you know, but the banks would say, oh, we don't want to foreclose on people. There's a lot of pretense around it, and government saying, oh, well, if we had understood this. But now all the masks seem to be off, and we're living with the politics of plunder, and the work that we do in New York City around financial justice, around grappling with really profound racial inequality and wealth inequality, income inequality, is now got a face that looks like that. I just Googled plunder and GOP tax bill, and that's what came up. Seriously. So let's look at a little more of the context. That's not a pretty picture, is it? But that's what we're dealing with. Just like an all-out theft of not just our economy, not just our treasury, but of our morality, of our institutions, of our democracy. It's really profound. So when we talk about consumer financial justice, it's easy to kind of get inside of the detail of whether or not the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act was followed. And we have to do that. People have rights under these laws. But we also need to look at the big picture, the big frame of what's really driving things like this. So, okay, when it comes to overall income inequality, where does New York State rank in the country in just, in terms of income inequality? We're New Yorkers, right? What are we always? We're number one. We're number one. Shameful. When New York State tops the list nationwide, New Yorkers with incomes in the top 1% make 45.4 times more than the bottom 99%. 31% of all income goes to the top 1% in New York State. I'm not hearing gasps. We should be rocked by this. We all know this, right? We know this. New York State ranks 7th most unequal when it comes to wealth inequality based on people's race and ethnicity. Now, I don't want to elide that so quickly. We've got income inequality, we've got wealth inequality, and these are different things. Have you talked about that at all today? Did Rachel Schneider talk a little bit about income is the flow of money coming in and out. Wealth is assets that are transferable, that you're able to leave for your children, for intergenerational sort of economic well-being and so forth. And anyone want to venture why that wealth inequality number is, the racial wealth gap is so great? What's the single greatest discrepancy in terms of racial wealth in this country? Homeownership. And you know, in New York City, you're not all from New York City, but in New York City, 2/3 of people are renters, but 1/3 of the people own homes. 1/3 of 8-point-something million is a lot of people, right? We always say, oh, it's a city of renters. Absolutely. Okay, so I'm gonna stop my ranting and tell you about our work, but not until I talk about Reverend William Barber and what he's doing. Anybody following that?
Yes.
Anybody excited by it?
Yes.
Anybody really excited by it?
Yeah.
All right, so he posted something today. I would say he tweeted it, but that's got a pejorative connotation. He posted something today. He was quoting Thoreau, right? It comes from the tradition of the Poor People's Campaign and all of those writings. He said, this is Thoreau speaking. This is William Barber quoting Thoreau. If I repent of anything, it is very likely to be my good behavior. What demon possessed me that I behaved so well? And then Reverend William Barber wrote, in the face of so much injustice, we all need to stop behaving so well. And so there was this question that came up in the last panel about how do we sort of address violence non-violently, or how, if we're feeling violent, how do we, I'm paraphrasing, that wasn't quite it. But I still feel like it's not violent to speak truth to power. It's not violent to organize and build power collectively and to call things for what they are. And we must absolutely do that. And the organization where I work, this is what we're about. Okay, so our mission is to build a just economy that works for all New Yorkers. We we have a vision for an economy that's based on racial and economic justice, that's based on cooperation, heaven forbid, that's based on equity, that's based on ecological sustainability. And we do that, we pursue that mission by working with grassroots, constituent-led community groups that are in neighborhoods where the people in the neighborhoods lead the organizations and speak for themselves, working with organizers. And we work with them to challenge discriminatory economic practices that harm entire neighborhoods and that perpetuate segregation and inequality and poverty. And then we also support groups that are creating community-based workplaces, worker co-ops, community land trusts, mutual housing, community cooperative financial institutions that are owned by people in the neighborhood, and so forth and so forth and so forth. I'm just going to talk to you very quickly in wrapping up about a couple of campaigns we have going. And the campaigns director where I work was a very good organizer. As I was walking out the door, he ran after me with these sheets. And he said, please hand these out if anybody wants more information or get involved. I hope they will sign up. Okay, so do I have one more minute? I have 2 more minutes. Okay. So I won't go into my whole thing about the concept of the American dream. Let me show you some maps. Okay, can people see that? Because it's kind of light in here. That's a map of New York City. The diagonal lines are neighborhoods that are more than 70% non-white. Actually, they're more than 70% black and Latino. If you didn't see a map of segregation in New York City until this second, you're seeing one now. That's a map that shows segregation fundamentally. But it also is a map that shows bank branches for every 10,000 people in a neighborhood. Do people have a mental map of New York City? Like, do you see that? Do I need to go over there and point at stuff?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Sure.
I'm wrapping up. I really promise I am. Okay. Here's Central Brooklyn, Bedford-Stuyvesant, Canarsie, East Flatbush, Crown Heights, Southeast Queens. Here's JFK Airport, the Rockaways. This is St. Albans, Laurelton, Rosedale, Jamaica. These are neighborhoods that are predominantly what?
Black,
Black, and what else?
Latino.
And middle and upper income. So sometimes you'll be like, oh, well, there's not enough money in the neighborhood. Sorry.
Use the mic, can't hear you.
What?
Use the mic, can't hear you.
Oh, you can't hear me. Never
And if you turn those lights, if it's possible, then
These are predominantly middle and upper income neighborhoods, a lot of them, these zip codes. So it belies the point that we often hear that, oh, well, it's just about money. Banks aren't going to locate where there's not money. Well, actually, there's quite a bit of money. These are the wealthiest parts of Queens, and they're predominantly black neighborhoods. I can't reach that high. You see the Bronx up there? So there's fewer than one bank. Less than one bank branch for every 10,000 people wherever you see no color. This is a redlining map. This is not a picture of accountability. This is not a picture of economic justice. I don't know if Rachel talked about it today, if you heard her earlier, but CFSI has done a lot of research and has a lot to say about how a bank account is like a stepping stone to economic security and financial security. So you don't have a bank in your neighborhood. Well, what is that? Well, that's from decades of compounded institutional racism, we would say. All right, so we have a couple of campaigns I want to tell you about. One is, if you go to the next slide, that's a bank, that's a Upper Manhattan. We're kind of like at the top of the map where we are right this second. It's the Upper West Side, the Upper East Side. You see Central Park. And you can't see it because it's too light in here, but I'll share it with you later. It's a bank branch map that shows you every single hexagon. The blue markers are bank branches. The red markers, if you can see them, are check cashers. And there's one pawn shop, which is yellow. Go to the next one, please. This is Inwood, Washington Heights, Inwood, and part of the South Bronx. You can't see it, but you will if you get this slide for real. It's almost all red dots, which are check cashers, and very few blue dots, which are bank branches, and a whole bunch of yellow dots, which are pawn shops. That's because in those white areas that I showed you on the first map, some people have to deal with money. They have to transact business financially, right? So what happens is it gets filled in by these fringe financial institutions, and poor people pay more. So there's all this exploitation going on, and that's why we're working to defend the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. It's one campaign I'm going to tell you about, then I'll stop talking. If you ask me questions later, I'll tell you about other campaigns. But the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau was the sort of shining gem of financial reform created with the Dodd-Frank Act after the financial crisis. And do people know what's going on there?
Yeah.
So it's constituted as an independent agency with independent funding. That agency's been hijacked. It's being held hostage. It is no longer an independent agency. Right? And so we are working around defending the CFPB, organizing, and actually, you might have heard, just yesterday, the Lower East Side People's Federal Credit Union, got any members in here? Filed a federal lawsuit suing Donald Trump and Michael Mulvaney for this takeover. Okay, so I'll tell you more later, but my time is up, and I can't even, can you just flip through slides really fast? Oh my gosh. This is a slide from last year showing where the foreclosure filings are in New York City. It's the opposite of the bank redlining map, and the numbers are spiking again. These are notices. This is about a campaign to keep payday lending out of New York, which David Rosen has been really instrumental in. We got to keep doing that. That's about a divestment campaign, and I'll tell you later about our public bank if you want.
And if you're willing, we can forward on behalf of all these to all the conference participants.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right.